All right, there we are. And I know we're going to have Eliam joining us. There he is. So good stuff, guys. We're going to get started here in a second. In the meantime, I see a lot of familiar faces over there in the attendee list. If you guys get a chance, go ahead and use the chat feature and just chat into us and go ahead and let us know where it is that you guys are tuning in from, where we can find you guys on Instagram. If you guys are on social media, we'd love to be able to connect with you guys and connect outside of this webinar. So go ahead and post in there where you are tuning in from, and then we can kind of stay connected. And then in the meantime, Eliam and I are going to be kind of going over with you guys today, kind of like our playbook, I would call it, right, Eliam, on how we kind of go about, looking over deals and looking over things. For those of you guys that don't know Eliam, Eliam's one of our acquisitions team members here on the side of the acquisitions of the business, and he's a 21-year-old deal maker that's out there just crushing it, taking a lot of action and taking a lot of action in his hometown specifically. Well, not his hometown, but where he grew up in California City in the Antelope Valley. And so, again, we're going to kind of go over today on our deal review, just how Eliam has been able to kind of, grow his deal flow and grow his deal making ability and how I've been able to do that as well. And we'll kind of give you guys a brief rundown on how it is that we're doing what we're doing. Would you say that's fair, Eliam?
Yeah, that's fair. We're going to teach people how to spot great real estate deals, how to take action, how to get that consistent deal flow. Acquisitions is the lifeline of our business. As flipping, we can't find the next deal, then we're not going to have the next profit. Let's give them some time to reconnect right there. But how's everybody doing? Where's everybody coming from? What markets are you in? I'm personally out here in the Southern California markets doing real estate investing out here. Been doing this for over about a year and a half now. Kind of started off in a sales role, and then I ended up landing into acquisitions here with Alex and Will. They've been able to teach me how to do a couple of deals. Got a couple of deals under my tool belt now. And now I'm kind of just targeting how to build a consistent deal flow and teach you guys how, whether it's to find your first deal or, build that consistent deal flow. We're a startup company, so we're always building, we're always growing and trying to scale. And whatever we could help you guys out with, that's what we're looking forward to do. There we go. I think we got Mr. Will Walls back in. Might have a little bit of connection issues. There we go.
Yeah, so it looks like I might have a little connection issues here, but we'll get through regardless. So again, I'm happy to have Eliam on here, guys, because Eliam is, like we said, 21 years old, and he's now been taking down a couple of deals with us here with the company. And so, who better than to kind of go through deal making than one of our very own that we've kind of, shown the ropes and shown how to make deals. And now, like we said, Eliam's, making deals up in his hometown, Antelope Valley, where we do a lot of business as a company. So I think that should be really cool. Before we dive into that though, guys, just a quick kind of update. I just got back from Hawaii. Eliam is out in Hawaii, so we kind of traded places. And then I got to hang out with Alex a little bit while he was out there. We hosted a incredible Deals and Aloha meeting last week. So that's why, you might not have seen us on here. We were actually in Maui, or on Oahu, on the island of Oahu at one of our projects there. And we had about 100 people come out, to check out that project, to see how we're able to do deals both in California and, I guess you would call it remotely in Hawaii. So really cool to get out and again, get to the islands, get to see the Deals and Aloha spirit that they have going out there. And obviously it was really cool to be able to share one of our projects with all those other, deal makers that are out there doing deals on the island. So that was really, really fun. Eliam, if you get a chance, you probably should go up there and check it out too. It's a beautiful beach right across from us.
Yeah, I remember
really up there on the west side.
Yeah, I remember I went out. It was earlier this year, or me and Alex were out on the island of Maui first, and I was out there, kind of just being mentored by him and kind of just shadowing him for a week after I got my first deal. And then this opportunity came up. It said, "Oh, there's a potential deal in Oahu." And Alex looks at me, he's like, "You want to go to Oahu?" I was like, "Sure, let's go chase down this deal." So I remember being there during the due diligence period, and coming back about 7 months later, kind of seeing the progress and how that deal has progressed. I mean, it's going to be, something I am interested in seeing. And, it's kind of like a full circle moment. Obviously, once it finishes, And as well, I mean, shoot, like this is 2 years ago. Like 2 years ago, you started real estate investing. Like, did you ever think that you'd be doing deals out here in Hawaii?
When I first started, I actually got to come out and see our, $1.3 million acquisition. I did the walkthrough on that one. So very similar to you, it was just on island, and, an opportunity came up and it was like, hey, we're going to go see this property. So I actually completely forgot you were on island back at that time. And you and Alex and one of the other guys took a little, $50 island hopper flight on Southwest over there. And so you actually got to see that property beforehand.
Yeah.
So you should definitely get out and go check it out now, because the progress is, definitely coming along, and we're excited to see that one get closer and closer to the finish line. We also, on a personal level, my house hack that I'm working on, I would say we're about 95% of the way complete with that project. We're going to be doing our appraisal this week on Friday, and so I'm really excited for that one. That's a property that I'm going to be buying off the company. The company did a flip on this one, and we're essentially going to flip it for $0 of profit, and flip it directly to me. So I won't be competing with other end buyers. Eliminate the competition, eliminate anything on that end. And I'm really excited to get a house hack going here in the South Bay, the city of Hawthorne. I'm going to have a unit in the back and then my main unit in the front, which will be really nice. Every first of the month, start getting some rental income, right?
There we go. That cash flow, right?
Yep. And then just another big success, the team, we did a negotiation training with our entire team, and it was really fun getting people from every side of the business, right? Not just Eliam and I on the acquisition side, but our office manager, our operations manager, our virtual assistants, they all got to come and kind of be a part of that negotiation training. And, really when you break it down, everything you do is a negotiation, right? Is, hey, can I get that done for you on Friday? I don't know. Could you get it done on Thursday? If you don't push back and negotiate, you're usually going to get left with what's available. So I thought it was really cool to see the entire team kind of come together and really, engage and absorb all that information that we went over. So that was a really cool day as well.
Yeah, negotiation is a really big thing, especially if you're going to hold yourself as a business person, whatever industry you're in, whatever skill set you're in, whatever kind of category you're in. You're always going to be negotiating. If you have something that you want and you want to ask for it, you got to figure out a creative way how to ask for that and get it for the best deal or the best possible outcome. So that all comes down to negotiation. And especially here in acquisitions and finding great real estate deals, negotiation, if you don't have that tool sharpened, then more than likely you won't be able to tread these murky waters if you don't have negotiation dialed in.
Yeah, I think negotiation is the root of all business, right? Is he who can negotiate best usually will be the last one at the table. So I think, again, it was really cool just to see the entire team engage in that and really kind of absorb everything that we were doing. Obviously, Eliam, like, we do a lot of negotiation on our end, on the acquisition side. But again, like, every single thing you do ultimately can boil down to a negotiation. So I want to go ahead and get things started with us here today. And like we said, we're going to talk about negotiation. We're going to talk about deal making. We're going to kind of talk about, how Eliam and I are doing what we would consider the best practices to get this kind of stuff done. Why I think our business has been so successful is because, we've found a certain way to skin that cat, and, being able to replicate that over and over again really has been helpful. And I think a lot of that just comes down to the best practices, right? Like, how are we approaching the deals? How are we going after them? How are we taking them down? And like I said, today we'll kind of go through, on our end, what we kind of consider to be those best practices. So Eliam, let's kind of dive in and go over some stuff.
Yeah, man, let's definitely dive into this, how to spot a great real estate deal. So let's jump into those best practices. So Will, what is some of the best practices you do in spotting a great real estate deal?
Yeah, I think like all deals, right, it comes down to what we essentially call the pillars, right? There's going to be the four main pillars, which are going to, ultimately determine whether or not we can buy this property or whether it's best for us to not be that end buyer. And those four pillars, if you guys are not aware, those are going to be motivation, condition, price, and timeline. So, when we break those down, right, like, Eliam, why is motivation important?
So motivation is really important because that is the foundation of the deal. So the reason why this seller is selling this property, or the reason why the seller is in this particular pain, we always like to attach the pain to the sale of the property. Many people tend to forget it, but those are 100% correlated onto why someone is selling their property. And if you could solve their problem and help find a solution to their pain point, then you're probably going to be the best fit, the best investor to help them out.
So if the condition of your property is poor, you might be more motivated to sell the property. It doesn't mean it's a guarantee. So that's why usually we don't start with condition, because just because you have a shitty, ugly house doesn't mean you want to or need to, or like Eliam said, you have pain that is causing you to sell that house. You might be perfectly comfortable with having a tarp on your roof. That just might be what you're used to. You might be, totally fine with your windows not being dual paned, right? Like those are just things that doesn't necessarily mean condition equates to you needing to sell. But I think the motivation side of that ultimately is one of the more important ones, right?
Exactly. No, I 100% agree with that. We've been on many seller appointments where we've seen houses nearly falling off apart, but it just seems like the seller is perfectly okay living in that situation. And sometimes that's what we have to keep in mind. I've never heard of a real estate investor or a real estate deal come apart without knowing the motivation. Every single time someone does a real estate deal, there's always a why. Why did this happen? And why did you do this?
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, condition doesn't necessarily lead to a sale, but motivation 9 times out of 10 will. And if that motivation is linked to condition, you might even be in a better condition or a better state there because you have a couple of those pillars going your way.
Exactly.
Price is a little obvious, right, guys? Like if the price doesn't fit within your box, it probably won't work out. If they're, expecting a number up here and the property is worth something down here, price can be a pretty easy one to discern whether or not, they're motivated enough to hit the price that you need, or whether they're not motivated enough to be willing to wait for the price that they want. But a big part of that is, again, the timeline, right? Like, is that person willing to wait, or are they in a position where they do not actually have time to wait, which would, again, relate back to that motivation one. So I think, for us, our best practices when we look at those 4 pillars is, really understanding the motivation and how we as a company are able to provide a solution for that motivation, right? Obviously we have rehab, specialists, we have our construction teams, they can go in and fix an ugly house. But I think it's that motivation that really is the underlying factor when it comes down to whether we're the right person to purchase that property or not.
Yeah, 100% agreed. So those are the 4 pillars: motivation, condition, price, and timeline, which is all really important. So something that we do with our company, so we're all kind of salesmen and acquisitions at heart. So whenever we're always pitching ideas to each other. So whenever I go up to Alex or I go up to Will and I have to pitch him a potential deal and why we need to invest in it because it's going to make a profit, I have to make sure that I have the most information possible to each of those 4 pillars. The more information you have on this particular deal, the more leverage you will have when it comes down to the negotiation. I remember reading a book, and the negotiation training that we were doing is the person who has the most information is more than likely going to be the best negotiator and have the best playing cards and have the best leverage.
Couldn't agree more, man. And obviously, when you play poker, that person isn't going to just show you their cards. Right. So if it was that easy, then, we'd be buying houses every minute. So, how we're able to get that information out is, I think we ultimately try to focus on, 2 or 3 big questions, and they're all, who, what, when, where, how. But the biggest 3 out of those really are how, why, and when. Right. When are you looking to sell your house? When are you going to get foreclosed on? When do you need to make a decision by? How is that decision going to affect you? How is that decision going to affect your family? How are you going to make that decision? Why are you making that decision? Why did you decide to sell? Why didn't you decide to sell to somebody else? Why did you decide to communicate with us? Right? All of those are questions that can ultimately lead you back to that big one, which is the motivation, right? And again, if it was as easy as everybody just showing their cards, we wouldn't be playing poker, right?
100% agree. Those high, why, and when questions are something I use every single day in my acquisitions process, or even sometimes in your daily life, just getting to know more information. And don't worry, like sometimes it is uncomfortable to ask those questions, because more than likely that motivation, that pain point that you're trying to poke at and discover, a lot of the times it's really personal. So people have their defensive guard up, or they have their guard up because they don't want to, because sometimes we're just strangers looking to figure out why they're going through this. And sometimes people don't just like opening up. So we try to build up into that point by asking these other type of questions first, nibbling at the fact, and then we ask the big one, like, why do you need to sell this property, and how can we solve it for you? And when are you looking for it to be solved? You know, and building up that point so you can be able to be the solution to their pain.
Yeah, and obviously I love the concept there, right? It's you're trying to solve somebody's pain, and for you to do that, you know, oftentimes, like I said, people aren't willing to show their cards. Like if you're dealing with a foreclosure, that's often something that might be embarrassing for you to be speaking about. You might feel, you know, doubt and remorse and you know, a lot of pain right there. And so, you know, usually people aren't going to just be willing to let that pain out, right? You have to do a good job on your end of actually asking those questions, getting those answers out of them, and you know, stacking those answers to really kind of find the underlying, you know, reason. And ultimately for us, you know, we can tell pretty quickly whether or not we're going to buy this property, right? If we ask these questions and it starts to fit into our buy criteria, our buy box, then that's something that's going to start to light up our eyes, right? And if it's, hey, you know what, I'm maybe going to sell my house in 8 months, you know, I might be looking for retail for it. You know, those are numbers, those are times that don't really fit into our buy box, right? We're looking to buy immediately. We're looking to buy at a discounted price. And, you know, if you're not able to get us either of those, then, you know, we're pretty quick to get to that notion. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. We that's another thing important about spotting a great real estate deal, is learning how to disqualify a lead or a potential deal right away. Because the last thing you want to do is invest weeks, months, days, time into a lead that already showed you indicators at the beginning that it was a disqualified lead.
I'm thinking of your lead, Mr. Terry, right now. Terry that just drug you along. And, you know, again, like ultimately it was, hey, you know, we didn't do a good job on our end of, you know, figuring out that motivation. And, you know, ultimately that ended up, you know, biting us in the butt there, because, you know, we weren't able to get a solution for that guy because we didn't know what solution he needed, right?
Exactly. I mean, I know it's towards the beginning of my journey when I was, you know, reflecting back on it, because that's what you'll do sometimes when you have deals that didn't go your way, or something that a problem you couldn't solve. You start reflecting back on it and start breaking it down like a case study, and you ask yourself the hard questions, like, why couldn't I get this done? How could I have done this differently? And when am I going to do this again? That way I don't run into the same situation. I mean, the problem was, I mean, he had a house, he was an investor himself. Good old Terry, he was an investor himself. So he was savvy as well. And he knew what property he wanted. He wanted the highest dollar, like every investor like us want. We always want to sell our property for the highest dollar. I never really got to the situation on why he wanted to sell that property. And when I reflect on it, there's some indicators that show me. One point in our conversation, I was building rapport with him. He mentioned to me that he had a brother that was his business partner that passed on, unfortunately. It was during that project. They purchased this property together, him and his brother, the seller and his brother. They purchased the property together because they wanted to flip it together. And obviously that dream couldn't come into reality because his brother passed away. And I just ignored that important piece of information. Maybe that's why he couldn't let go of the property. I ask myself sometimes, maybe that's why he couldn't sell the property, or he wasn't willing to sell the property, because there was some emotional attachment to it. There were some personal things to it, because his goal for this property was to flip it with his brother. Who wouldn't want to flip a property with their brother? Would you be willing to let it go easily? Just think about your family home. A lot of people don't like giving up their family home so easily. So maybe that was his pain. That's what I reflect on sometimes. And maybe that was his pain. That was his problem. Did he want some like a memory for him? How to, you know, honor his memory? Maybe keeping the property is how he honored the memory. And if I would have asked these questions, had this conversation at the beginning stages, then I would have ended up realizing that maybe this wasn't a qualified lead, or maybe he really doesn't have a problem that needs to be solved.
Or maybe we should have just planted a tree and put a plaque on it in his brother's honor.
Exactly.
Or
I've
something
seen
like
that
that
happen
would have,
sometimes.
yeah, that would have just, again, hey, now you're getting to keep that legacy of your brother. But again, those are usually the questions that you can do that are going to lead you to get to that solution quicker than not. And I love what you said there, Iliam, about disqualifying a lead, right? Oftentimes we can disqualify a lead early on in the process. And then oftentimes you disqualify the lead during your due diligence period, right? Like you have a time period where you're going to get to go out and see that property in person. And oftentimes that is going to be where you might disqualify that lead, because maybe some of the information you were told over the phone, now comes back to be not true. Hey, you know what? You told me your bathroom and kitchen were in really good condition. They're not. You told me your house was 1,400 square feet. It's really not. You told me this, and it really turned out not being that way. And so a lot of times that due diligence period is important after, you get down to those first couple of pillars, and now it's the time to go and confirm those pillars, right?
Exactly. 100%. You confirm the pillars once you book the appointment and go on that appointment. And just like we know it, the golden rule of thumb is all sellers are liars, right? All investors are liars, but sellers are even worse liars, Everybody's trying to hype up the piece of property they have because they don't want to tell the truth, because obviously when the truth gets revealed, it will affect the numbers, or it will affect some way and shape or form.
So, Iliam, let's talk about the house now, right? You get there. Are you a contractor?
No.
Do you have rehab experience?
Barely any.
So typically what we're doing, guys, to make sure that we're able to knock these appointments out of the park is we found that it's been best practice for us to kind of pair up when we go on these appointments during the due diligence period, and make sure that you always have, what Alex and I call is your person that's going to be doing the talking, and then your person that's going to be doing the actual research. So somebody needs to be there to schmooze the seller, schmooze the real estate agent, make sure there's that relationship, make sure there's a bond. We call it building rapport. And then somebody needs to be there to actually take note of what is needed to be done at this property. And that person needs to be a little wiser than you or I on the rehab side. So typically we'll try to bring a project manager, one of our contractors, or one of our handyman, or somebody that's out in that area nearby to go walk that property with us, so that we can make sure that we have the most information before going in and making a decision.
Exactly. That is 100% correct. And sometimes we go on these appointments and we don't have, our contractor may be busy, or a project manager may be busy, but we always bring that additional person with us and say that he's our project manager, or say that he's our contractor, because in the eyes of the seller, or in the eyes of the agent, it gives them credibility. And we display to them that, hey, we're experienced and we have this credibility and we have the resources and the bandwidth. This is my project manager. This is my contractor. He's going to look through on the property. He's going to end up telling me after this appointment what the findings are, but I'll be talking directly with you and relate that information to you. And that's how we've played sometimes with me and Will. Sometimes I'll go on the appointment. I say, hey, Will's my money partner. He has to check out this deal. Or, hey, Will's my contractor, right? Especially if it's a property that needs condition. But more than likely, you always want to shoot to have either a contractor with you, your project manager with you, or get a home inspection done on the property. Rely on
right. So if we're in our due
advice.
diligence period, we'll get a home inspection, right? Like to spend $300 to $500 to have a professional inspect the property that you're thinking about buying. That's probably been one of our best practices, is making sure, A, we know what we're getting into, but B, when we pass that deal along from the acquisitions team to the contractors to the rehab team, they also get an idea of like, hey, you know what? Iliam told us this thing needed a new roof, but I can actually see in this home inspection report, like, yeah, this thing definitely needs a new roof. You can tell by the couple of pictures that the inspector took and the way that he called out, hey, this roof is probably not going to last much longer. So I think that's a great best practice of ours is again, if it makes sense and you have the property under contract, go ahead and use that money to get that inspection, because you'd rather know if there's more than what you had seen or more than what your project manager had seen. And oftentimes that third set of eyes that doesn't have an investor mindset, that's just there to look at the property, they can give you a lot of insight that you might not have gotten otherwise.
100%. That is 100% correct.
So Eliam, we're here, we're on this appointment, right? You and I, we're talking to the seller. We're on a direct to seller appointment. What are some of the most important things that you think a seller is interested in if they're thinking about selling you this property?
Okay. So one best practice that we do is we always want to understand exactly what our seller wants, whether that's money, do they need moving assistance, do they need a flexible timeline, or what are the terms that they're looking for? Because oftentimes we made the mistake that money was the only factor to the deal. And oftentimes that's not the case. There's also other things going involved, and money is not always the most important thing. Sometimes family is the most important thing to a seller, that they need to move their kids to a different school in a certain timeline, or they are getting relocated from a different job and they can't find no one to buy their house, and you're just willing to sell it to anyone because whoever is going to help them relocate according to timeline. Sometimes people don't really care about money. Yeah, money is a factor and they'll get money in their pockets, but they have other things that they are looking for than just money.
I told you the one time, man, I went back and I looked at this deal, they ended up taking $5,000 less than what I had offered. And when I texted the seller back, I was like, hey, what happened? Like, I thought we were great. I thought we were, going to move forward with this deal. And I saw you just accepted less money. Like, what was it? And, what it came down to is I had put 14 days as our time to close, and the seller needed a month. And that was my fault because I didn't get that information. I didn't realize, hey, her timeline wasn't 14 days. She wasn't looking for the quick close that some people normally are. She was actually looking for the 30-day close so that she could wrap up all of the other items that she needed to do before she made that move. And again, that was a mistake that I learned from. And now moving forward, like you said, Eliam, you want to know, is it money? Is it assistance? Is it time? Is it the terms? Like, what is it that seller ultimately wants to make this deal move forward?
Exactly. And it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, is if you know how to ask those how, why, and when questions, you could use those to your advantage and end up really figuring out what the seller wants. Like, well, could I ask the seller or the agent, like, hey, when is this seller looking to move? Cool. The seller comes back with a response. And then you say, why is the seller looking to move within that timeline? Okay, cool. How can we help him meet that timeline? And then the agent or the seller comes back to you, like, okay, well, I may need a moving truck to go to this location. I may need to stay. I may need the funds before I can make the move. Okay, we can give you a lease back after the property. But it's asking those questions to figuring out how you could best craft an offer that meets their pain and meets their solution to their pain.
Agreed. And again, if you're not able to uncover those, pain points, those are usually where you're able to kind of, those are the daggers, when you have that information and you're able to go back on it. Hey, you said you needed 30 days. Like, I'm able to make that happen for you, and I'm happy to make that happen for you. Those are usually the ones that go a little bit further along in that process than the other. And again, you never want to assume it's just money. Money isn't the only thing. Almost 99% of the time, there's something other than money. That's why they're willing to give up some of their money. They're willing to leave some of that meat on the bone, is because money isn't their only driving factor. Good stuff.
Exactly.
Well, I want to talk about, how you would kind of so once we're on this appointment, right? We've asked some of these things, we've asked these questions. The final thing that we like to do, right, Eliam, is we like to go back and review everything that we went over with that seller and kind of make sure, or with that agent, whoever it is, and make sure, hey, when we were on appointment, I understood that you said you needed this. You then told me that you needed that. And then after that, you said that this would happen. And then if that happened, then this would go down and we would buy this property. And again, we call that our kind of our recap, our summarizing of what it is that this seller said and or needed, because we want to, again, be crystal clear on our end and not walk out of there with a 14-day offer when it should have been a 30-day offer, right?
100%. It's that end of the appointment as you're wrapping things up. You want to summarize everything that you just learned about the seller and everything that you learned about the property and confirm. And that's one thing Steve Trang teaches us a lot. You have to confirm what the seller has said. And if they say yes, then you got everything hit on the nail.
That means you got to go ahead.
No,
yep, I'm good.
Exactly. But if they say no, Or they say, well, actually, and then you realize that, oh, shoot, I still need to collect more information about this.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's that summarizing, because once you summarize it and you get in your car and you write down your notes, you want to make sure you have the accurate things possible. So then you can relate that information and craft up the offer you need to do.
You know, another big thing of Steve Trang's was when you repeat things out loud, the seller gets to hear it. So when you tell them like, so Eliam, you said you wanted $1 million for your home that's worth 500,000. You know, when you say that back to them, then it really, wow, that did sound kind of stupid, didn't it? Like you want $1 million when there's not a house in your neighborhood that's sold for 5. Like, are you really serious at this point, or you know, are we just kicking rocks here? So, you know, I think that summarizing really gives you a chance not only to, you know, recap what it was that they liked, but also it's a great time for you to bring in some of your expert opinions, right? So at this point, Eliam, you know, now maybe you've had a 5-minute chat.
Yeah, 100% agree right there, Will, asking those questions. Yeah, thank you, Adriana. Yeah, we really appreciate that you like all the information we're sharing with you guys, and hopefully you guys are getting a lot of value from this, and, you know, implement some of these strategies or some of these tactics next time you're prospecting, next time you're making an offer, next time you're going after chasing a deal, right? Making sure you understand what problem you are solving, because at the end of the day, we're here to solve problems. And if we buy your house along the way, then so be it.
If you guys have any questions so far about what we're kind of going through, please use that Q&A feature and ask away. If you have any questions, again, we'd love to kind of go over those with you. Sorry for my bad connection, guys. I'm down here at my house hack, and I might need to get some internet service provider out here just to kind of make sure if the service isn't providing us enough, you know, bandwidth. But cool, Eliam. Well, the next thing that we'd like to do, you know, and obviously we do this before we go on an appointment, but we'll do it afterwards as well, is we like to verify our comps, right? So one of our best practices is when we're actually at that property, we're going to go ahead and drive the neighborhood and check in person our 2 or 3, 4, maybe 5 properties that are closest match, right? And we will, obviously we're not going to be able to go up and knock on this person's door and say, hey, I want to walk in and see your kitchen. But we want to drive by, we want to see that curb appeal. We want to see whether their house looks similar to ours, whether their house, you know, maybe has some other feature to it that is superior to ours, such as a really nice, you know, fenced in yard or a shady area. Those are things that can go a long way.
Yeah, 100%. Verifying those comps, driving around your local neighborhood closer to your subject property is going to be really important, because that information is used for yourself. Because when we're flipping, we just want to match the comps. We're not looking to set the highest comps. We're looking here to match the comps. I think it's Ryan Pineda who really emphasizes it, especially when we do his training and we're learning from him. He says, like, this isn't rocket science. Just copy the comps. That's it. Just copy the comps. Why do you copy the comps? Because it is a proven fact. It is a proven data point that if a property looks like this, it's going to get you this price. And that's why we verify the comps, because we said before, we're not experts. We're all sales guys and acquisitions guys at heart building this company. We rely on experts' advice to copy the exact comps. We're not here to do anything special and spectacular. We're just here to provide a nice product that a family could call a dear loving home.
And sometimes we drive by these and we realize, like, wow, this house is actually in a far superior neighborhood. You know, maybe our street was a 1-lane street with cars parked on both sides and 1 lane going through the middle, whereas this one's a double wide with 2 car parking spots on both sides. Maybe that house that you're comping to is on a tree-lined street that just feels and looks, you know, more family and welcoming than your street. Maybe you're closer to commercial or industrial buildings than you had thought when you did your initial analysis. Those are all big points that you're going to be able to find only if you're doing your drive-bys on your comps.
Exactly. And then you use this information when you enter back into the negotiation and leverage against the seller or the agent. You tell them, like, hey, I understand that our subject property is in this location. The comps that you send me, or the comps that you find me, they're in a far superior location. Does our subject property have these amenities, or is the park this close to them? No, the park is closer to the other one, right? Another big thing too, especially here in Los Angeles, is homelessness. Homelessness is a huge problem out here. And if a house has, an empty lot in the back and there's a lot of people just camping there, but the comp doesn't have an empty lot in the back and there's no homelessness, around there, those directly affect the price. And you tell the agent, I'm like, well, if your house has this problem around it, the comp doesn't. So you're telling me this doesn't affect the value? And then you
I
let it be
remember I went to a house in South Central one time, and that was the first time I realized that the houses down there, they actually have alleyways behind them. And this particular house that we were going to look at, I assumed that the alleyway behind it was open. And so I assumed the garage at the back of that property would be accessible from that alleyway. And when I got there, I did not know that some of the streets down in Compton in South Central LA, they actually close off those alleys with gates to avoid having homeless people, gangs, and troublemakers coming through the back of your property in your alley. So I did not know that. And the comp that we were looking at was a couple blocks over in a superior part of neighborhood where they did not have those gates closed and those alleyways were accessible. Those neighbors did have pride of ownership and kept that alleyway safe and clean of debris. And their house was far superior because they had that back alley, and that back alley led to the garage that could be turned into the separate entrance ADU, where ours, no matter what we did, just couldn't have that same access way.
100% agree. And you bring this information up to them and you kind of lead them. It's like that one saying, you bring the horse to the water. It's like that with sellers and agents. You guide them to what you see and have them confess it and have them confirm it and have it make it feel like it's their idea and like, oh, wait, that's right. Why am I thinking I could get this for the property when I obviously have these other surrounding factors? And you don't say it out of your own words. You make them say it. You make them come to the realization that, hey, these are the things that are going around. And you're right. Maybe I'm asking for too much.
Good stuff, man. I think, again, when you look at that, and we have a question coming in from Adriana, asking what radius we use to make the comps. So you heard there, sometimes it's as tight as a couple of blocks. Sometimes it's about a half mile. Sometimes it'll be a mile to 2 miles, depending on the neighborhood. A lot of the properties out where, Eliam does a lot of our business with us in the Antelope Valley, we might need to extend our radius because there's not as many houses per block as there are down here in core Los Angeles. But knowing that often can come down to your realtor as well. So we tend to work with, really good realtors, really good brokers that can give us that guideline as well. They might let you know, hey, Eliam, I know you thought you were going to go a mile, but you really can't cross over Rosecrans. Once you cross over, you're getting to a different part of town, different neighborhood, a different area. For me, another thing is we don't go different cities, right? So if you're on the border of Hawthorne and you're near Redondo Beach and you're coming to a house in Redondo Beach, that Redondo Beach house is going to be way different than your Hawthorne house because of the zip code it's attached to, the school districts that it's attached to, again, just the general neighborhood. When you say Redondo Beach, it has beach in it. When you say Hawthorne, it doesn't have that vibe. So you really want to be careful when you're using your comps. We try to stay as close as possible, but when necessary, we will expand out, to make sure that we can find an accurate property.
Exactly. That radius is important, and having those different criteria filters as well is also important to narrow down your search. I think we could count countless times where we've had wholesalers or we've had agents send us a deal. And especially when it's in the bigger city and metropolitan areas, they try pulling comps from the neighboring cities just because it meets that half-mile radius. But then when it comes down to it, it's like, well, these are two different cities. That means there's two different city councils. That means there may be two different political parties. There be two different ways of doing things, right? So that's something we bring up to the seller and agent, like, hey, we're purchasing a property in Hawthorne. So we're looking at properties in Hawthorne. We don't care about the surrounding cities because that's not Hawthorne. Because we're going to be doing a flip in Hawthorne. So we want to know how the city of Hawthorne does their process. We want to know how the city of Hawthorne receives flippers or investors, right? Because when it comes down to it, city of Redondo Beach or all these neighboring cities, they're not going to be able to help us. No, but no, this is awesome stuff right here, Will. And yeah, if you guys have any other questions, we're here to answer them and help you guys overcome obstacles or any challenges or anything you're struggling in your business. If we could provide some advice or some value to it, we're more than happy, whether it's questions about negotiation or going on your first appointment or looking at a deal or analyzing a deal. We're here to serve you guys.
So let's pull up a deal, that we recently locked up here real quick, Iliam. I know you are the host, so we'll have you kind of share your screen. Quickly kind of dive into this deal and just show you guys exactly where those best practices came into play on a real deal. Just again, so you guys can see both the practice behind it and then it actually in play and how that kind of works out. So this deal that we're going to talk about is sorry about that. I was saying that this deal came from a wholesaler, correct?
Yeah, well, this deal actually, the lead was generated from social media. So it was a free lead, social media, a wholesaler or someone in our network that we know said, hey, I have a deal in this city. I swiped up, I DM'd them. I said, hey, that's my market. I'm your go-to guy. Tell me more.
And obviously, being active on social media, that can create opportunities for you, right? So, this lead shows up. We're kind of diving into it. Obviously, as we mentioned, guys, we want to bring our experts into these. We want to bring the people that know more about the process than we do in whenever we can. So the first thing we did is said, hey, you know what, we would be interested, but first things first, we've got to get eyes on this property ourselves. And, that's when we kind of said, hey, let's bring one of our project managers out there in the Antelope Valley along, and let's go take a look at this property, right?
So this is the property that we did. It's one of our recent deals that we just acquired. This one's in the city of Rosamond. So saw the story, tell me more, send me over the address. And I already know this kind of area like the back of my hand. So I already know where the conversation was going to go. I already had an idea of what the valley was going to be. We already had an idea of what the rehab was going to be, but we actually let them confirm that to us. We don't want to skip the process. We still want to find out more information. Just because I know what a deal could do out there in that area, and I know it's a deal at those numbers, doesn't mean I skip the process and still go through collect the motivation, collect the price, collect the condition, collect the timeline. More than
Let's
often,
talk about
there's
that real quick, Iliam, because I love that you mentioned that, right? Like guys, oftentimes when you become as good as we are at sales and acquisitions, you know more than the seller. So I love how Iliam said that, right? Like we didn't want to play like we knew more than the seller. We still wanted to play like, hey, tell us more about this place. Tell us like where'd you get the number from? Like how are you getting here, right? We didn't allude to the fact that we knew more about the property than we did, right?
Exactly. You never want to allude to the fact. I think Steve Trank says it because if you display to the fact that you know more than the seller or you know more than a particular person, you kind of instill fear in them and you make them feel
intimidating, right?
Exactly. You make them feel intimidated. You make them fear you and they don't feel comfortable talking with you because you're going to be like, oh, this person's so much smarter than me. Why am I doing business with them? I'm so dumb. And you don't want to make your prospect feel like that. You want to have them, you want to guide them to that situation though. You want to guide them and not just tell them right away.
And Iliam, we know a lot about this area, right? If you just scroll and show your screen over there on that map.
Mm-hmm. Let me get it right there.
Yeah, just if you zoom out right here, guys, the street that intersects with this. So that you guys see B Street right there above?
Yes, sir, right there.
That street alone, us and our partners have made close to $1 million on B Street. So we're very, very familiar with this area, right? Like this is an area that we know like the back of our hand. But like you said, Iliam, you don't want to seem over knowledgeable or intimidating to that person by bringing too much experience into the situation, right?
Exactly.
We also like to call it like assuming out loud or, making it super stupid simple, right? Like keeping the questions as basic as they can be without making it seem, like we said, like we have a superior amount of knowledge than this person.
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
So what were some of the biggest things that we found about this property, Iliam?
So the biggest things that we kind of found, right, like we said, it was social media lead. What we ended up finding is that the person who presented us a deal was actually co-wholesaling the deal. So it wasn't even his deal to begin with. And he was just co-wholesaling it. And frankly, they locked it up. They locked up the property at exactly the number it needed to be flipped at. They locked it up at the flip price. They didn't lock it up at the wholesale price. And this time, at the time when this lead came about, it was at the beginning when the market was shifting and there was a huge frenzy and everybody was like, the market's going to crash, or everybody was pivoting. Everybody was in that pivoting stage. So we took that into consideration. It's like, hey, if we're going to do this deal, we want to make sure we consider all these factors and all these risk factors to make sure that we don't get our asses hit on the back end. So that's why the property was locked up too high, because when they presented this deal to us, they were using comps that weren't even comparables anymore. Comparables from 6 months ago are not accurate. 5, 4, 3, 2 months sometimes are not even accurate. So we had to say like, hey, we can only rely on what has been sold and discount it as much as we can. And unfortunately,
what we had sold recently, right? It had transferred hands just before us.
Yeah, back in 2021, the seller bought it, and then they had uncooperative tenants. They ended up destroying the place. They didn't have the funds to end up doing it, and it was a bad investment opportunity for them. I believe
when we say destroyed the place, like that's kind of an understatement, right? This place was rocked.
Rocked, yeah, 100%. Like these pictures don't even do it justice. I mean, we have more updated, accurate pictures, but kind of to get into the numbers of things, we ended up kind of pushing the co-wholesaler out, and we said, hey, we can't give you an assignment fee, but we have some other potential things that our company offers, some resources that could be of value to them. So yeah, we didn't give the wholesaler an assignment fee or the co-wholesaler an assignment fee, but we said, hey, just because you brought us the lead and brought us a deal, it's barely going to make us any money and make any criteria profit, but we don't want to leave you with nothing. How about you enjoy a weekend either at our Guadalajara penthouse or our Hawaii house? Like, go enjoy that. It's yours for the weekend, right? And we leverage those type of things as well in our network. And when we're getting deals, like, hey, we may not be able to give you money on this deal, but but
if you bring us a deal, we can get you a place to stay for the weekend, right?
Exactly. So that's how we leverage our negotiation. And it goes back to never assume that money is the only thing that someone wants. So kind of jumping into the traits of the deal, is 2-1, 744 square feet. Obviously, you could tell it's a Spanish style house. It had a weird layout, and we were kind of struggling like, okay, cool. We've bought in properties as low as 100, 130, 150, 200 in that area. So we knew around what area we'd have to be in. And I told them to begin with, I mean, hey man, like just letting you know, we've never purchased a deal higher than this price. So I don't know if you're going to be able to do it. May not be your buyers unless you get me at this price range. They're like, okay. They originally were asking for 170. We ended up locking it up for 140. So let's get into,
and obviously, again, like that's a pretty significant discount, right? And going back to the motivation, this seller was motivated because they had bought in a rental property and the rental property was not turning out the way they had envisioned it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why somebody would be willing to sell a property that they had bought in a year before for a discount, right? Is, hey, I thought this was going to be a great rental property. I thought I was going to make cash flow from it every month. But what actually ended up happening was the opposite, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So the opposite ended up happening. They ended up incurring more headaches. They went underwater. They're not making any profit from it. They don't want to deal with these headaches anymore. So as we keep discovering more about the property, there was squatter issues. There was a lot of things going on. Information was going on. The problem as well, sometimes when someone's co-wholesaling or someone's just disappointing a deal, is that they don't have the information about the deal. So a lot of this information was kept away from us and withheld from us. We ended up discovering that we had a squatter issue until like a couple of days before we closed escrow. And we were pissed. We were like, hey man, we said you were going to deliver this thing vacant. There's people literally living in the property that we're about to purchase. You never told us that from the beginning. That's a whole nother risk. The market's going crazy. I told you guys that you guys locked it up at too high. And I told you guys that this is why I needed it at this price, because this situation was going to occur. Now, how are you going to do to solve this thing? So kind of right here, we have these comps, right? Active under contract, pending close, have the address, half a mile radius.
And you guys can see here, we're going 180 days and out to about a mile in this area. You guys will see once Helium, pulls up the comps down there in the bottom left, you can see it. There's only 5. So sometimes you need to go a little bit further out than a half a mile. Sometimes you need to go, to a distance where you're actually getting properties that are matched, like for like, apple for apple to your property.
Exactly. So you see right here, I mean, it is a small desert town, so there's not many comps going around. And considering the fact this is only 744, we place it at anything 1,000 square footage or less in a mile radius. And here it doesn't really matter if you cross freeways, really. Doesn't really affect it too much. It's more of the neighborhoods and the style of house. So here we have a couple houses, right? This one's a distressed property that was built for 125. This is actually purchased from our partner. Our partner purchased this property. Paul purchased this one, 125. So, okay, cool. We have an idea around what price we have to purchase these properties at. We also have, these two. These two are major comps in the area at the time. So this one at 1,000 square feet doesn't look like ours, Spanish style, but it is an SFR, 1,000 square feet, 3-1, and ours is a 2-1, and it sold for 296 back in June. All right, we could tell that this one wasn't a flip, but it was a nice family lived in. They took very good care of their house and ended up having homeowner prideship. Then we had this one right here that was more like our comp. This one closed for 270. This one's 744 square feet, 2-1, same layout as ours. It's not Spanish style, but it is the same layout. And this one you could say that it was kind of flipped. It wasn't the most flip. Obviously, it didn't have the best pictures, but it had new appliances, new carpet, new flooring.
They had done some work, right? It wasn't one of our flips, but they had done. Usually this, you can tell, would be like a property that was kept as a rental before, and they just did a minor upgrade to it. They didn't do the full turn, but they just, they were getting it back to, viewable so that
All right, cut out there. But yeah, like he was saying, it might have been a rental. They just put some lipstick on it, just make it look presentable so he could list it on the property. And then this one closed for 270. That wasn't many comps in the area. There was these other ones that didn't really resemble what we wanted because this was different layout, but same square footage. This one closed for 310 back in, well, this is recently in August, earlier in August. So that's good. We didn't have that comp at the time when we purchased the deal, but now that helps us. This one's active, and we started looking around the area. So then what we did was we're reasoning, and we're like, okay, cool, 270, 296, 125. And we're like, okay, what if all the news that are going on the market and the way the market's going and all these trends are going, what if we could only sell this thing for 250? Let's place this thing at a conservative 250 and see what happens. Okay. So we're comfortable with, an ARV of 250. We're going to be the lowest purchase price home on the market. Of course, it's going to attract attention. It's going to bring a lot of eyes to it and see what we can.
Whenever you list and you're the lowest price point in an area, like you're going to get as many eyes as you can, and that's what we're shooting for. Is we're shooting for as many eyes as possible, right?
So at the time being, when we were discovering the lead, we had it at 140K, right? 140K purchase price. Let's focus here on the middle, right? We said we want this thing at 140. Let's get an ARV of 250. At the time of the rehab, we thought it was only 50K going on at 180-day sale. And it meets our profits, right? As the 28%, we're looking for 30% ROI, and we're looking for 30K minimum profit. And one thing that we like to do in general rule of thumb is that we never miss out on a deal if it's within a couple of dollars. And then we had an acquisitions fee of $3,000, which is an assignment fee we paid the original wholesaler because we didn't want to leave the guy with no money. He wanted 10K, but we said, hey, you could take 3K. We give you 3K, but nothing more because the deal's already tight as it is. And we're doing you a favor on taking this deal off your hands because you have no other buyer. We are the only buyer in this area willing to take down this project. So that's kind of what the numbers came down. And then we ended up relying on expert advice. We ended up getting more knowledge. They said, hey, we could actually get 260 for this thing. But the rehab is actually a little higher. And it's great. We still meet our ROI. We still make a couple more grand. And that's kind of how the deal ended up falling in order with these numbers. 140K purchase price. We're flipping it for 260, 55K rehab. And that would be kind of our ROI and profit that we're looking to exit out of the deal. Well, awesome. Well, I think that's, close to wrapping up right here. That's kind of, if you guys have any unanswered questions, feel free to type it in the chat. Adriana said, how did you guys deal with the uncooperative tenant and how did you evict them? So the seller had the uncooperative tenant. The property was delivered to us vacant. What happened was during the escrow process, there was a squatter situation. So squatters aren't considered technically tenants. There was just a squatter situation breaking into our new property that we were going to purchase, and that wasn't displayed at the beginning of the deal, and we weren't told that there was going to be squatters or anything like that. But we didn't end up evicting them. We ended up kicking them out. We ended up just boarding up and securing the property that make sure that they didn't get in. That was kind of the solution to that. And we have the neighbors looking out for the property for us. We have a runner checking on the property to make sure that a squatter doesn't come in. But yeah, I think Will might have disconnected here with his internet service and stuff, but it is 1 p.m. It's been an awesome webinar. Thank you guys for joining. Hopefully we provide a lot of value for you guys and help you guys solve some questions that were unanswered to you guys. If you guys have any other questions, you feel free to reach out to me or Will on Instagram. Reach us on the Facebook group. And also we hope to see you guys at our upcoming downtown LA real estate investor meetup happening on September 22nd from 5:30 p.m., 8:30 p.m. Link is in Will's bio, Instagram bio, Alex's bio. We're all going to be marketing it actively. So thank you guys for joining, and I want you guys to have a nice day.